fabric ripped in her hand just as the shot cracked through the chapel wall. Nora Hayes didn't scream, though everyone else did. She pressed her back against the wooden pew, fingers tightening around the edge of her sister's wedding veil. The air smelled of burnt powder and something sour, like sweat on old cloth. Her first instinct was to duck, but her second was worse. She looked for Mabel. The bride stood frozen at the altar, white lace clutched in fists, lips parted but silent. Behind her, Calvin Boone reached for the revolver tucked beneath his tailored coat. Another shot. This one hit the bell tower, sending splinters of red dust and bird shit raining down the aisle. The crowd broke then, a stampede of corsets and boots, and panicked men knocking over chairs and each other to get out. Nora didn't move. She watched her father crawl over the pews toward Mabel. He mouthed something she couldn't hear, grabbed her arm, and pulled her toward the back. Mabel let herself be moved, but her eyes, those wide, glassy, blue eyes, never left the front doors. Neither did Nora's. They were open now. One hung on its hinge, and through the blown dust and late afternoon sun, a man stepped inside. He didn't duck. He didn't blink. He just walked down the center aisle like it belonged to him, hat in hand, dust on his coat, the butt of a rifle slung over his shoulder. Nora knew immediately he hadn't come for the wedding, and he hadn't come for Mabel. She stood up, slowly, letting the ruined lace fall from her hands. He saw her, and didn't look away. By the time the sheriff's men arrived, the shooter was long gone. One window cracked, one bullet embedded in the choir rail. No injuries, except to nerves and pride. They called it a warning shot. A jealous drunk, someone said. An outlaw taking aim at Boone, said another. But the man who walked in after the shots, no one seemed to know him, and no one remembered seeing him leave, except Nora. She stood outside now, hands clenched beneath her shawl, watching the last wagon rattle down the road. The air had turned dry and sharp, the kind that cut when you breathe in too fast. Mabel's wedding veil was still tucked under Nora's arm, torn down the middle like someone had tried to split the day in half. "You all right, miss?" The voice came from behind her, low, not soft, but even like the sound of boots crossing dry wood. She turned. It was him, closer now, no rifle, no swagger. Just a man who looked like he'd walked too far without asking for help. "I saw you in the church," she said before she could stop herself. He nodded. "Seemed like I saw you first." He didn't smile. Nora's throat went dry. "You were late." "I'm always late to things that don't matter." The silence between them stretched long. Someone slammed a door across the square. A child cried. Somewhere, a piano started up too fast, like someone was pretending the day hadn't cracked open down the middle. Then he said, "I'm Wade Callahan. Didn't mean to scare folks. Wasn't my mess. You came in after the shots. Didn't want to miss the only honest part." Nora swallowed hard. "What part is that?" "The look on your face," he said. "When everyone else was running." She should have walked away, should have turned and joined Mabel, who was likely already complaining about the dust in her dress or the delay in their reception. But her feet stayed. "You ain't from Amarillo." "No. What brought you here?" Wade glanced up at the chapel's cracked bell tower, then back at her. "Land, south of here. Bought it with my own money. Building something that don't blow down easy." Another silence. He didn't fill it. She didn't either. He shifted like he was about to go, then paused. "If you come by this Sunday, I'll show you something worth seeing. If you're not afraid of what's real." Then he tipped his hat, turned, and walked toward the edge of town, his boots leaving a line of dust where no one else had walked. That night, Nora sat by the fire. The wedding veil spread across her lap. She should have mended it, Mabel would ask. But her fingers froze where the bullet had caught the lace. Thread burned, fabric curled at the edge, like it had been seared instead of torn. But that wasn't what bothered her. Inside the fold of fabric, caught on the seamed corner, was a sliver of paper, not wide but long, tucked in, like it had been meant for someone else. She pulled it free. It was old, creased, stained, folded twice, and it bore a name no one in this house had ever said aloud. Her breath hitched. A past loop opened like a trapdoor beneath her. Down the hallway, Mabel laughed. Sharp, brittle, Upstairs, their father coughed twice before falling silent. Outside, the wind picked up, blew through the cottonwoods like a whisper with weight, and under her breath, so soft she almost didn't hear it herself, Nora said, "He didn't look at the bride once, but he looked at me and didn't look away." Sunday came with wind, not the usual kind that whispered through Amarillo's alleys and rattled shutters, just to remind folks it was still there. This wind came heavy, low, sweeping like it had purpose. It tugged at skirts and lifted hats, and it carried dust in thick, dry ribbons that hung in the air like smoke. Nora had waited all morning. Pretending she wasn't, she swept the porch twice, rearranged the display in the store window 3 times. She told her father she was heading out for a walk. Didn't say where. He didn't ask. That meant he knew. It was a long way out of town on foot, but Wade hadn't said how to get there. Just that she'd know when she saw it. And she did, after the barbed fences gave way to flat grassland, after the cottonwoods thinned into scrub, and the sky opened wide with no roofs to interrupt it. There it was, a ridge line, a cut in the earth like a scar, and at the base, a single post stuck upright in the dirt with a strip of faded red cloth tied around it, flapping like a dare. She crossed the boundary without pausing. The land looked empty at first, a few cedar trees hunched against the wind, a circle of rocks where a fire had once burned down to gray ash. And then, movement. Wade stood beside a pile of lumber, sleeves rolled, shirt damp with sweat down the spine. He wasn't building yet. Not really, just measuring, staking out the edges. Marking a place before it became a home, Nora stopped at the edge of the clearing. He didn't turn, but said, "Wasn't sure you'd come. You didn't leave directions. Didn't think I needed to." That made her smile. She hated that it did. Wade dropped his measuring rope, turned to face her. Dust clung to the edges of his jaw. Like he'd been here since sunrise. There was something steady about him. Something unhurried, like time moved differently around him. "What do you see?" he asked. Nora looked around. "A lot of it." He nodded, pleased. "Good. That means you're honest." She walked a little closer, stopping when her boots hit a patch of dry grass flattened underfoot. "Why here?" He shrugged. "High enough to see what's coming. Low enough to grow something real. Wind cuts, but it doesn't bite. And there's water." He pointed. She followed his hand to a narrow stream, barely visible through the brush. "It's nothing now," he said, "but it runs deep under. I've been listening to it. Even when the top dries out, it still moves underneath." Nora stared at the ground. "So you trust what you can't see?" "No," he said. "I trust what stays." That landed harder than she wanted it to. Wade brushed dirt from his hands, then picked up a small piece of chalk and knelt. He drew a rough rectangle on the packed earth. "This'll be the house. Kitchen faces sunrise. Porch catches evening light. Barn back there near the slope. You've already planned it all." "I've walked enough places that weren't mine to know what I want when I find one." His words made the wind feel louder. She stepped across the chalk line and stood in what would be his doorway. "So, what's the point in showing me all this?" He paused, straightened, looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not looking for someone to save me, Nora," he said. "I'm looking for someone to build with." There it was, not a proposal, not even a promise. But it shifted something in her chest all the same. Something she'd held still for years. She looked down at the chalk. "That's a hell of a thing to ask someone you barely know." "I ain't asking yet." "Then what's this?" Wade walked toward her, slow and even, not looming, not gentle, just present. "This is a beginning. You can step out any time. But if you step in, I remember it." A choice. She could have made a joke, could have turned and walked right back to town, like none of it mattered. But instead, she asked, "What if it all breaks?" He studied her face a second longer than was polite. "Then we build again." They didn't talk much after that. He handed her a tin cup of well water. Cool iron tinted, showed her the edge of the property line, marked with bent nails and notched stones. She asked about the wood. He said he'd hauled it in by hand from a mill 12 miles east, because the train was too slow, and the man who ran the delivery wagon didn't know how to tie lumber right. He didn't say much about himself. She didn't press. but before she left, as she brushed dust from her hem and looked back at the outline of the house he hadn't built yet, she asked, "Why now?" He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. Because when a thing's right, and you see it, and it sees you back, you don't wait around for the dust to settle. You claim it. Nora didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. She got home just before supper, boots muddy, hair windswept. Mabel was already at the table, perfect posture, not a strand out of place. Their mother glanced at Nora once, frowned at the dirt, and said nothing. Mabel waited until they were in the hallway to speak. "You smell like cedar and smoke," she said. "Let me guess. You were out south." Nora didn't stop walking. "I went for a walk." "Is not what he looks like." Nora turned. "And what does he look like?" Mabel's expression didn't change. "Like someone who doesn't stay." Nora met her sister's eyes and saw the worry under the contempt, and maybe, something else. But she didn't argue. She just said, "I'd rather risk a man who leaves than spend my life with one who never truly arrives," and walked away. That night she lay awake, the red cloth on the post still fluttered behind her eyes. But more than that, more than Wade, more than the wind, was the image of that paper scrap tucked in the wedding veil. The name written there, a name she hadn't dared speak aloud, not yet. What mattered was it hadn't been Wade's handwriting, and it hadn't been an accident. She still didn't know how it got there, but someone had put it there, deliberately. The next day, a new name hit town: Seth Lowry. Nora heard it first from the store clerk at Boone's Bank. "Some drifter came in this morning asking about Callahan. Said he was an old friend, but I didn't like the look in his eye." By midday, Seth had found Wade, and by sunset, Nora saw them together. Quiet conversation under the overhang at the blacksmith shop. Wade had his back to her. Seth faced her directly. He didn't nod, didn't blink, just looked. She turned the corner and walked faster. That night, she sat by her window as thunder rolled out east. No rain yet, just the warning of it. She thought of the line Wade drew in the dirt. The house that wasn't there yet. The porch, he said, would catch the light. And she thought, what if it never gets built? "If you come by this Sunday, I'll show you something worth seeing, if you're not afraid of what's real." That sentence looped in her mind, but what echoed louder, what struck deeper, was something else entirely, something the stranger had said in a voice too even, too calm. "If he won't tell you the whole story, ask him why he doesn't sleep when it rains." She didn't sleep that night, and when she woke, the ground was damp, and the footprints by her window were still fresh. Nora didn't speak to Wade the next day. She didn't avoid him. Not exactly. But she made sure she wasn't near the blacksmith's when he passed through town. She lingered longer at the store, restocking items that didn't need restocking. She helped her mother sweep the porch twice, then took the broom back into the house when Mabel offered to finish the job. The name Seth Lowry lingered like a splinter under her skin. She hadn't said it aloud, hadn't asked about the footprints outside her window either. But the silence around both things felt heavier by the hour. When dusk rolled in, pale and slow, Nora found herself sitting at her vanity, hairbrush stilled halfway through her braid. The mirror caught her off guard. She looked tired, older, somehow, not older like her mother, with soft lines and stillness, older like a piece of furniture someone had kept too long worn, but expected to stay useful. Behind her, Mabel appeared in the doorway, already dressed for dinner, green silk, hair pinned just right. "You didn't come down." Mabel said, "I'm not hungry." "Pi asked where you were. I said you'd gone for a walk." Nora turned slightly. "You cover for me now." Mabel stepped inside. Her heels clicked once on the wood before she stopped. "I'm not your warden. You can disappear wherever you want. I just thought maybe you'd appreciate not having Ma ask why your boots are always muddy." Nora looked back at the mirror. There it was again, that edge, that familiar coldness wrapped in silk and concern. They weren't enemies. No one in town would say that, but there were rooms between them that hadn't been walked through in years. "You were always good at saying the thing that sounds kind, but cuts anyway," Nora said softly. Mabel folded her arms. and you were always good at acting like the victim of things you never fought." That landed harder than Nora expected. She stood up. The air between them bristled. "You think I've never fought?" Nora asked. "I fight every damn day just to be seen. Not as your shadow. Not as someone's sensible daughter. As a person who has her own wants, her own wants." Mabel interrupted, voice sharp. "You think a man like him gives a damn what you want? You think building a house with your name on it means he's not running from something?" Nora flinched. "What do you know about him?" Mabel hesitated. But just for a breath, enough. Enough to know trouble doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles and draws lines in the dirt like it's poetry. Nora crossed the room, fast. Until they stood eye to eye. "I'd rather risk a man who carries his past than marry one who hides behind money and manners." Mabel's jaw tightened. "You don't know what I married." Nora stared at her, and for a split second, the mask slipped. Mabel's shoulders sagged. Just a little, her hands, always so precise, fidgeted with the lace at her sleeve. But then the hardness returned. "Just don't get your heart set on someone who doesn't know how to stay," she said. Then she turned and walked out, heels quiet this time. That night, Nora sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The oil lamp flickered low, casting the room in yellow, brown shadows. She traced her finger along the wood grain, then down to the small drawer by her right knee. Inside it, folded 3 times, was the scrap of paper from the veil. She hadn't thrown it away, she should have, but instead she opened it again, stared at the name. The ink slightly smudged now, still legible, not Wade's, not Calvin's. Not a name anyone in her family would recognize. But it meant something, she just didn't know what yet. The next morning, Nora took the long route to the store. She passed the church, paused briefly to look at the patched-up window, where the bullet had punched through. The glass was new, but the frame still showed a thin black burn. The choir rail hadn't been replaced yet. She reached out, touched the charred wood, and pulled her hand back quick. It still felt warm, which made no sense. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of something tucked under the pew nearest the door. A button. Metal, scorched, flattened like it had been stepped on, then kicked aside. She crouched, picked it up. There was something etched into the back. Letters, tiny LCR. She didn't know what it meant, but it didn't belong there. And it sure as hell didn't fall off a drunk's coat. Later that day, Wade came to town again. He didn't seek her out. But he saw her. She was outside the store, restocking flour, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, not a smile, not quite, a recognition. And then, him, Seth Lowry, leaning against the edge of the blacksmith's post, arms folded, hat tilted low. He wasn't watching Wade. He was watching her. Nora dropped the flour sack too fast. It hit the stoop hard, split a seam. White dust puffed up in a cloud, caught the wind, and blew sideways. Straight toward Seth. He didn't flinch, just stepped forward and said, "Ma'am." His voice was smooth, polite, but it felt like a trap. "You dropped that." She didn't answer. He crouched to help gather the loose flour, his hand brushing the wooden scoop she reached for. "Wade's a good man," Seth said quietly. "But he's not a simple one." She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were too steady. "What are you to him?" she asked. Seth smiled. "That depends on the day." She stood, dusted her hands. "If you've come to warn me, don't bother. I can make my own decisions." Seth stood too. "I'm not here to stop you, Miss Hayes. I'm here to see how much of you he's told the truth to." That struck. Before she could answer, he walked away. Not back toward Wade, but into the saloon across the square. That night, the storm rolled in fast, thick clouds, green at the edges, the kind that didn't just threaten rain. They promised it. Nora stood at her window, watching the sky tear itself apart. Lightning cracked low across the plains, lighting up the ridge for half a second. She saw a figure on horseback. No lantern, no saddlebag. Just waiting, then gone. She wasn't sure if it was real. She didn't sleep. In the morning, Mabel sat at the table, teacup untouched. Her usual grace was gone, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes rimmed with red. Nora froze in the doorway. "You all right?" Mabel didn't look up, just said, Do you ever wonder if you chose too late? Nora sat across from her slowly. I think, she said. Some of us are just slow to realize what matters. Mabel finally met her eyes. You think you've realized it? Nora didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. That evening, Wade found her behind the store, stacking crates. He didn't say hello, just stepped close and held out something wrapped in cloth. She opened it, a carving of a house, rough, unfinished, the lines of the roof still jagged, but shaped real. I want to show you something, he said, and she followed, not because she had to, because some part of her already had. As they reached the clearing again, wind moving through the grass like a low breath, Wade said nothing for a long time. Then, finally, he stopped. I don't sleep when it rains. She looked at him, waited, and he said nothing else, just stared at the place where the porch would be. Just don't get your heart set on someone who doesn't know how to stay. Mabel's words rang louder now, but it wasn't fear Nora felt, it was something else. Something heavier, because now she wanted him to stay, and she wasn't sure that wanting would be enough. When she turned back toward town, the wind had picked up again, and far behind them, barely visible against the dusk, a second figure stood watching from the ridge, not moving, not leaving, waiting. The sky was bruised purple when Nora stepped off the wagon. They'd taken the long way again. By Wade's request, though he didn't say it outright, the ridge road bent around the valley, giving a wider view of the land he called his. But this time, it wasn't empty. A foundation had been laid, rough beams staked into the earth like ribs, floorboards uneven and unpainted, stretched in a crooked square. At the center, a single upright post, tall enough to suggest a roof would soon follow, cast a narrow shadow toward the east. Wade climbed down first, offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. The wood creaked beneath her boots as she stepped up onto the frame. He said nothing, just watched her move across it, slow, as if the whole thing might collapse if she walked too hard. It's not much yet, he said behind her. She turned. It's yours. That makes it more than most ever get. He exhaled, smiled. Not big but real. I laid it by starlight, he said. Didn't trust daylight to keep my hands steady. She looked down. Dirt still clung to his cuffs, and a long scratch ran from his wrist to his thumb. You build alone. He nodded. Seth helped with the timber. Didn't say much. She raised an eyebrow. Is that usual for him? Wade's jaw shifted. He only talks when it matters. And when does it matter? When he's about to leave or about to lie. Nora stepped to the edge of the frame, squinting out over the land. The breeze was lighter today, but still constant, brushing across her cheeks like a reminder. You ever plan on telling me where you two came from? She asked. He joined her at the edge. You ever plan on asking? I just did. He nodded once. New Mexico territory. Mining town called Grant's Hollow. She frowned. Never heard of it. Most haven't. It's not on maps anymore. Died quit. What happened? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small tin box. Opened it. Inside were nails. Not new, salvaged, some bent, some rusted at the ends, others clean, sharp. These are from there, he said. Took them from the floor of a burned-out chapel. After the fire. She stared at the box. The mix of ruin and survival. He handed it to her. You keep ashes, he said, so you remember what not to build again. She closed the lid and felt the weight of it. Later they sat near the stream. Wade brewed coffee over a small fire, using water pulled straight from the shallows. Nora sat with her boots off, toes grazing the edge. Skirt hiked just high enough to avoid the mud. It's quiet here, she said. That's why I came. I thought maybe you came because of what you left. Wade poured the coffee, handed her the tin cup. Steam curled up between them. You think I'm hiding? I think you've been waiting for someone to ask. He didn't deny it, just looked at her, the way he had that first day in the church, like she was a question he didn't yet know how to answer. I killed a man, he said. No hesitation, just the truth, laid bare. She didn't flinch. Was it just? Wasn't murder. But I won't pretend it was clean. She sipped the coffee. It was bitter, strong, no sugar, like the truth. You ever think about what you'd do different? He poked the fire with a stick, sparks snapped upward. I think about what I lost. Not what I'd change. And what did you lose? His voice dropped. Someone I didn't save in time. She set the cup down, watched the water for a while, then said, You never talk about her. He didn't move. She's in that tin too. Nora said quietly, Isn't she? Not in the nails. In the burn. The air cooled as the sun began to fall behind the ridge. Wade stood, brushed off his hands. Come with me. He led her around the bend of the valley where the trees grew thicker, and the slope dipped toward a cluster of stones piled in a crescent. This is where I buried what was left. She knelt beside the largest stone, ran her fingers over the etched surface. There was no name, just a carving, a single wildflower. I did. Took 2 days. You never told me. I didn't know how. He knelt beside her. I can't promise clean, he said. I can't promise easy. But I can promise this land, this house. Everything I've got is built to hold, not run. She placed her palm flat on the stone and whispered, Then start with the truth. He took a breath. In Grant's Hollow there was a fire. Started in the saloon. Got to the church. Some said it was a storm. For what? For lies. Broken trust. Gold gone missing. A girl who chose wrong. Did you? No, he said. But I didn't stop it either. Nora looked up at him. And Seth? He was there. Same as me. Different sins. She stood. And now I try to build something that can't burn so easy. By the time they made it back to the foundation, the stars were out. He walked her to the wagon, held the reins as she climbed in, then said, I'm not looking for someone to save me, Nora. I'm looking for someone to build with. She looked down at him, the weight of everything between them, unspoken names, scorched towns, sisters who didn't believe, hung there, but she nodded. Then start with the porch. He grinned, kitchen first. Can't build love on an empty stomach. She laughed, just a little. Then she drove back toward town, the wagon bumping along the worn trail, dust rising in her wake. At home, Mabel waited on the porch, arms crossed, no smile. You've been out again. Yes. With him. Yes. Mabel stepped closer. You really think you know him? Then why go back? Nora met her gaze. Because he showed me the ground he stood on. And the things he buried there. Mabel blinked. And for once, had no retort. Inside, Nora laid the tin box beside her bed. Didn't open it, didn't need to. Some truths don't need retelling once they're shared. But as she slipped under the covers, she heard it. A low knock on the front door, then a voice, male, tense, urgent. Calvin. She sat up, heart racing. Mabel opened the door. What is it? There's a man asking questions about Wade Callahan. Said he's from New Mexico. Nora was already halfway down the stairs. Calvin turned toward her. You need to hear what he's saying. Who is he? Calvin's face was pale. Says his name is Seth Lowry, and he ain't alone. From outside, the wind rose, and with it came a sound Nora hadn't heard in years. The long, cold whistle of someone who knew exactly what he was walking into, and didn't care what burned after. Seth Lowry stood in the middle of the street, like he'd never left it. His coat flapped in the wind. Duster length and dusty, a half-inch of mud caked to the hem. He wore his hat low over his eyes, shadowing a face that didn't flinch at noise or motion. Behind him were 2 men. One thin and twitchy, the other built like a fence post. Silent and wide-eyed, neither had the posture of someone invited. Nora watched from the second-floor landing as Seth scanned the houses. Then he whistled again, low, drawn out. Too calm. Calvin, still in the doorway, turned toward her. He's calling him out. Nora's voice came fast, quiet. Where's Wade? Calvin shook his head. Ain't seen him since this morning. He was headed out west, maybe to check on that house of his. Nora stepped down the last stair, heart thudding in her ribs like a hoofbeat. She brushed past Mabel, who grabbed her wrist. Nora, don't. I'm not going out there. Mabel's grip tightened. Then where? Nora looked her in the eyes. To stop what comes next. She found Wade's horse tied at the south stable, but no sign of him, which meant he was walking. Bad odds if Seth came looking for blood. She didn't saddle up. She ran. The wind was behind her, hard and hot, the kind that carried storms and regrets. The dirt trail curled west, past the split fence and through the narrow gap in the hills. She caught the edge of the ridge just before sunset, and saw him, Wade, standing in the frame of the unfinished house, hammer in hand, coat slung over a beam. He turned when he heard her boots hit the plank. Nora. She didn't stop until she reached him. They're here. His face didn't change, not fear, not surprise, just the faint settling of breath, like something he'd expected had finally arrived. How many? Seth. 2 others. He nodded, set the hammer down. You come to warn me. I came to ask why the hell you're not in town. I don't run toward noise. Never have. She grabbed his arm. Then you better start. Because whatever this is, it's not just about you anymore. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then past her toward the ridge. They'll follow the wagon trail. Gives us till dusk, if that. She let go. What do they want, Wade? He didn't answer, didn't need to. Instead, he crouched and lifted a flat board near the corner post. Beneath it a cloth, wrapped satchel, heavy, too heavy for tools. He handed it to her. Don't open it. She stared. What is it? Something that should have stayed buried in Grant's Hollow. They rode back into town together, 2 horses pressed hard against the wind. Nora carried the satchel across her lap, like it might go off if tilted. Wade rode silent beside her, eyes scanning the road, jaw locked like he was chewing glass. They reached the edge of Amarillo just as lamps were being lit, and Seth was waiting, right there. In front of the saloon, he leaned against a post, arms folded, the same quiet smile on his face. The 2 men who'd flanked him earlier were gone now, but their horses were still tied outside. Wade pulled up hard. Nora dismounted fast, the satchel still in her hands. Seth looked up, evening. Wade stepped forward. It's done, Seth. Whatever debt you think you're owed, it's paid. Seth tilted his head. You sure about that? Wade didn't blink. I buried her. I stayed gone. I didn't speak your name for 3 years. That's not payment. Then what is? Seth smiled again, but his eyes stayed flat. You brought it, didn't you? Nora stepped closer, confused. Brought what? Seth didn't take his eyes off Wade. You told her, didn't you? About the fire. About the chapel. I told her what mattered. Not enough. He stepped down off the porch. Wade moved between them fast. You're not touching her. Then open the bag, Seth said. Nora stared down at the satchel in her hands. Slowly, she lowered it, untied the knot, unfolded the cloth. Inside was a ledger, old, leather-bound, marked with ash along the edges. She opened the cover, names, dates, amounts. It wasn't gold, it was blackmail. Nora looked up. What is this? Wade exhaled. Records from the mine. Every payout, every lie, every stolen cent. The town burned for it. Seth wanted it hidden. I wanted it exposed. Seth stepped forward again, voice cold. You think building a house on the truth makes it pure? No, Wade said, but it makes it real. Nora spoke, her voice low. Is this what she died for? Seth didn't answer. Wade's voice was rough. She didn't die for the ledger. She died because none of us stopped the fire once it started. Seth's fingers curled. You should have burned with it. And then the draw was too fast to stop. He reached for his gun. But Wade didn't. He just stood there. Nora did. She didn't think. Just moved. Stepped in front of Wade as the barrel came up. No. The shot didn't come, not because Seth missed, because Calvin was behind him. Rifle raised, cocked. Try it, Calvin said. See how that ends. Seth turned, slowly, measured. Always figured you'd back the quiet one. Calvin stepped closer. I back the one who doesn't lie. Seth looked back at Wade. This isn't over. Yeah, Wade said. It is. Seth nodded once, then turned and walked away. Didn't run. Didn't speak, just disappeared into the dark, his boots fading against the dirt road. Nora sat on the porch steps of her father's house that night, the ledger beside her. Wade sat beside her, arms resting on his knees. You didn't flinch, he said. I did, she answered. Just not enough to matter. He nodded. You don't have to stay in this. She looked at him. I wasn't in this. Not until today. But I've seen it now. The cost. The weight. Wade leaned back, eyes on the stars. I once thought hiding was mercy. That if I stayed quiet long enough, the past would let me go. Nora reached down, ran her fingers across the ledger's leather. It never lets you go. You either carry it or you burn for it. He turned to her. What would you do with it? She thought for a moment, then said, I'd build a table. Put it right in the middle. So anyone who sits across from me knows what I had to walk through to get there. From the shadows across the street, Mabel watched them. She didn't interrupt. Just lit the last lamp in the window and locked the door tight. In the morning, the ledger was gone, the satchel, the cloth, everything. Nora woke to find only a note left in its place, scrawled in Wade's sharp handwriting. Some truths deserve to be seen, not stored. Down at the edge of town, a stranger boarded a supply wagon heading east. He wore no coat, carried no bag, but in his hand was a single page torn from a ledger, and written in ink across the margin like a mark left behind, Property Deed Hayes Amarillo TX. Forged. You think building a house on the truth makes it pure? No, but it makes it dangerous. The church bell rang too early. Nora heard it before the sun cleared the ridge. 3 short chimes, out of rhythm, not Sunday. It was the kind of sound folks only used in one kind of emergency, something gone missing, or something found too late. She was already out of bed by the second strike. Downstairs, her father was pulling on his boots, jaw tight. Not speaking, Mabel stood near the window, still in her nightgown, staring at the dust trail gathering out by the road. You know what this is? Nora said, breath shallow. Mabel didn't turn. I know what they'll say. By the time they reached the chapel steps, a crowd had gathered. Wade stood just outside the church, arms folded, face unreadable. Beside him, Pastor Enoch was pacing in circles, sweat dotting his collar despite the cold. In front of them, laid flat against the wooden stoop, was a map. Not a body, not a weapon, a hand-drawn land map, unrolled like a funeral cloth. Red ink slashed across the center, property claimed, federal interest pending, and in the corner, stamped in black wax, was a seal Nora didn't recognize, but Wade did, railway claim. He muttered. Enoch's voice cracked. This land's spoken for, son. They've filed federal interest. All of it. From your ridge to the south fence line. That's my build site. Not anymore. Nora stepped forward. What are they claiming? It's not developed. It's just dirt. Enoch looked sick. Dirt's not the problem. It's what's under it. Wade's head snapped around. The water table. Nora blinked. What? The survey team came last week. Enoch explained. They found a stream vein under the ridge. Deep. Wide enough to support expansion. You didn't think to mention this? Wade asked, voice low. Enoch looked down. They said not to. Said it was federal now. Out of our hands. You let them walk onto my land and mark it like a slaughter lot. It wasn't yours, Enoch said. Not legally. There was never a deed filed. Nora froze, her chest tightened. That's not true. Calvin stepped forward from the crowd. I filed the deed myself. Enoch shook his head. Paper's not worth anything if the signature's forged. Nora turned slowly. What did you say? Calvin's eyes locked on hers, full of something sharp and ashamed. I checked the county book this morning. Your father's name's on the document. But the witness. It's not mine. Someone signed it in my name. Mabel stepped forward now, voice trembling. Who forged it? The answer came too easy, too familiar. Wade. I did. The silence after that hit harder than any shot ever could. Nora stepped back, 1 step, then 2. You lied. I held the claim, Wade said. But it wasn't legal. I needed someone local, someone whose name would carry weight. So you used mine. I was going to tell you. When? After they buried it under train tracks and said thank you kindly. Nora. She turned away. The bell was still ringing in her ears. Back at the house, Mabel poured whiskey before the hour hit 9. She passed Nora the glass without comment. Neither of them drank it. It's gone, Nora said finally. Mabel sat across from her, hands folded around the rim of her glass. You think he meant to steal it? I think he meant to survive. Mabel nodded. That's what men like him do. Nora shook her head. No, that's what men like Seth do. Wade. She trailed off, couldn't finish. Mabel's voice softened. The thing about men who carry fire, Nora. They'll always tell you it's for warmth. Until you're the one burning. Outside, the day stretched long and bitter. Wade stayed at the church, trying to make sense of the claim papers, trying to push back what had already been inked and stamped. By afternoon, the federal agents arrived, 2 men in gray coats with silver pins and polished boots. One held a folder thick with maps. The other carried a rifle strapped across his back, though he never reached for it. They spoke little, only to announce that construction was halted, effective immediately. Any attempt to interfere would be treated as obstruction. Nora watched from the porch as Wade stood still, hands at his sides, like he was waiting to be shot, but nothing came, just the dust trail as the agents rode away. That night, Nora went to the build site alone. She lit a lantern and stood in the half-framed skeleton of what should have been their future. The chalk lines were gone. Rain had washed them out. Only the post still stood, ragged cloth still tied near the top. She reached up, untied it, held it in her hands. It smelled like cedar and smoke. Like him, she knelt, ran her fingers along the boards, listened, and beneath the hush of wind and dry brush, water, still moving, still there, even when everything else had tried to bury it. Back in town, Wade waited on the bench outside the general store. He didn't flinch when Nora sat beside him, didn't speak first. She held the red cloth out to him. He took it, folded it, held it. "You should have told me," she said. "I wanted to. You should have let me choose. I was afraid you'd say no." She looked at him, and for the first time in days, he looked back without armor. "If you want something to last," she said, "you can't steal the ground it stands on." Wade nodded, then handed her a page, torn from a notebook, a new claim form, this time unsigned. "I won't file it without you." She read it twice, then folded it, slipped it into her pocket. "You won't need to. You think if you build it with love, they'll leave it be." That was the thought that followed her home, and she knew the answer, no. But maybe they'd think twice before trying to burn it again. The smoke wasn't thick, just enough to sting. Nora smelled it before she saw the glow, a slow, creeping red that flickered between the trees like a warning whispered too late. By the time she and Wade reached the ridge, the fire had already eaten through half the lumber pile. It wasn't an accident. The kindling was stacked too perfect, the flames too focused, starting from the east side, where the walls had just gone up, and crawling fast toward the frame like it knew where to hurt them most. Wade dropped to his knees and began shoveling dirt with both hands. Nora ran to the stream, filled the bucket, ran back. It wasn't enough. Nothing was, by dawn. The house was gone, not leveled, but broken, the frame sad, beams cracked. One side had collapsed entirely, a slow lean into the ash, like a tree giving up on standing. Wade sat in the blackened mud, arms streaked with soot, face blank. Nora didn't speak. There was nothing to say that didn't sound like loss, until Wade looked up and said, "They want us to quit." She crouched beside him. "They think if they take the bones, we won't rebuild." He shook his head. "They're not after the house, Nora. They're after the idea of it. The fact that we built without permission." She wiped sweat from her forehead, smearing ash across her cheek. "Then we'll build again." His laugh was short, bitter. "On what? The claim's still tangled. The water rights aren't ours. That fire just made their job easier." Nora stood, walked back to the wagon, came back with the folded claim form. The one he'd given her, the one she'd pocketed and hadn't touched since. She handed it to him. "We start again. But this time, together." They rode into Amarillo before breakfast, not to the courthouse, to Mabel's door. She answered in a robe, hair pinned up, tired eyes sharpening fast as she saw the suit on Nora's dress. "Who did it?" Mabel asked. "We don't know yet," Wade said. But Nora did, not exactly, but deep in her gut. She felt it. This wasn't just a threat. It was a message. Mabel let them in without asking more. Calvin was already at the table, a ledger open, spectacles sliding down his nose. "You heard?" Nora asked. "I saw the smoke," he said. "Woke me up before the rooster." Wade dropped the claim form on the table. "I need help. Legal help. Someone who knows how to push back." Calvin looked at it, then at Wade. "You're finally putting your name on it." "Both names," Wade said. "Hers and mine." Calvin gave a single nod. "I'll draft it today." Nora turned to Mabel. "I need to borrow your wagon." Mabel raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? North Ridge. There's a surveyor who works for the railway. Name's Luther Briggs. Mabel narrowed her eyes. That man's a snake. Exactly, Nora said. And snakes have trails? The ride to the North Ridge was long and dry. By noon, dust coated Nora's throat, and Wade's knuckles had turned raw from gripping the reins. They found Briggs near a makeshift camp, tent pitched between two flat rocks, horse tethered to a branch, maps rolled and pinned under a tin of biscuits. He didn't smile when they arrived, didn't frown either, just looked up and said, "You're late." Wade dismounted. "We weren't expected." Briggs shrugged. "Everyone's expected. Sooner or later." Nora stepped forward, dust still clinging to her lashes. "You signed off on that federal claim." Briggs didn't deny it. "Filed a report. That's my job." "You also filed that land was unoccupied." He leaned back on his heels. "Was it legally occupied?" She pulled the new claim from her satchel, unfolded it, held it up. "Now it is." Briggs eyed the names, read them twice, then said, "It won't matter." "Why not?" "Because you're too late. Rails are coming through Amarillo, with or without your house in the way." Wade crossed his arms. "Then we'll be under them." Briggs stood. "Listen, I've been in towns that fought this. You know what happens. They die slower." "That's it. You fight, you stall, you bleed money. And then you lose anyway." Nora stepped in closer. "So why warn us?" Briggs blinked. Then he smiled, just a little. "Because you were the only ones who built before the paperwork came through. You saw something worth staying for. Most folks run." She didn't return the smile. "We're not most." Back in town, Calvin had finished the draft, filed it, stamped it, and posted it, not quietly. He nailed a copy right to the church door, another to the general store, and a third at the blacksmith's post, where every man with something to say would walk past it by sundown. By nightfall, Amarillo was whispering, some louder than others, a few louder than wise. At dinner, Mabel said nothing, until Wade stood to leave. Then she caught his sleeve and said, "Don't make her a widow for a piece of ground." He didn't answer, because there was no promise he could give. That night, someone knocked on the back door, 3 times sharp. Wade opened it to find no one there. Just a bag inside a single bullet, wrapped in red cloth, no note, no signature, but he knew what it meant, so did Nora. "You really think they'll let you keep what you've built?" That was the question Wade couldn't sleep through. Because if the answer was no, then the real fight hadn't even begun. They came before dawn, 5 men, no uniforms, no names. But their silence spoke plenty. Wade spotted them from the back window. Shapes moving slow near the edge of town, staying just far enough to pretend they weren't aiming for anything. But their path curved, deliberate, toward the plot of land he'd claimed twice now. Once in ash, once in ink. He was already pulling on his boots when Nora joined him. "They're not here to talk," she said. "No. Then we talk first." They walked straight out to the build site, side by side, hands visible. Wade didn't carry his rifle. He didn't have to. The look on his face was sharper than any barrel. The men stopped 20 feet from the post that still marked the center beam. Blackened now, still leaning, but upright. One of them stepped forward, gray hat, weathered coat. A scar just under his eye, puckered and pale. "You got mail," he said, pulling a folded notice from his pocket and letting it drop into the dirt. Nora picked it up. She read aloud, "Cease and desist. Pending legal action. Property under injunction." Wade didn't blink. "On whose authority?" "Federal," Scar said. "Signed by who?" "Doesn't need a name. That's not how law works." The man smiled, slow. "Law don't work the way you think it does out here. Not when tracks are already cut." Another's forward, this one younger, hand twitching near his belt. "You could take a deal. Walk away clean. We're not for sale," Nora said. He looked her over. "Everything sells, miss, sooner or later." Wade took one step closer, shoulders squaring. "You've delivered your threat. Now leave." Scar's eyes didn't move. "You make this harder, people get hurt." Wade's voice dropped. "They already have." Silence. Then the men turned and left. But the message stayed behind, folded in red clay and boot tracks. Back in town, Pastor Enoch refused to take a side. I won't make the pulpit into a courtroom," he said. "That land used to hold your chapel." Nora reminded him. "Used to," he echoed. Then he shut the door. Others were bolder. Calvin posted the new claim again, this time nailed it to the town hall board. High enough no one could rip it down without tools. Mabel, without saying a word, handed Nora a box of 44 cartridges and locked the front gate. "This is what it is now," she said. "We guard or we give up." That night they stood watch, Nora and Wade, taking turns walking the edges of the burned frame. He held his rifle. She carried a lantern. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like breath held. At some point, Wade stopped her under the corner beam. "Tired?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet." He looked at her, the flicker of the lantern catching the cut across his knuckles. "You ever wonder if we're wrong?" he asked. She blinked. "About what?" "About fighting for something that might not make it." She studied his face. "No, I wonder if we're strong enough to finish." He nodded once, then said, "They'll come again." "I know. This time won't be words. I know that too." He touched her hand, didn't hold it, just enough to ground her. "We don't shoot first." He said, "Nope, but we shoot back." "Yes." They heard the horses just after midnight, 6, maybe 7, fast, coordinated, not coming to talk, not coming to torch, coming to take. Wade moved fast, circling back through the scrub to flank them. Nora crouched near the edge of the beam line, lantern off now, pistol in hand, breath shallow. Then, shouting, a shot. Hooves scattering, another shot. Closer, Wade's voice cut through a T. "Drop it." Then a man's scream. Someone ran. Nora saw a figure flash past in the dark, limping. Hand clutched to his side. She didn't follow. She didn't need to. Because 2 more came crashing through. And one stumbled straight into the frame where she stood. She fired once, not to kill. The shot cracked near his boot. He froze, hands up, breath coming hard. "Turn around," she said. He did, and looked straight into Wade's rifle. By sunrise, it was over. They'd caught 2, chased off the rest. Wade didn't gloat, didn't threaten, just tied their hands and dropped them at the sheriff's porch, with a note pinned to their chests. "This land is claimed. Come legal, or don't come at all." The town changed that day, not loudly, not all at once, but windows opened earlier, doors stayed unlatched. Folks nodded as they passed the charred build site, and when Mabel walked to the bakery, the owner gave her bread. No charge. The message was clear. We saw, we chose, we stand with you now. That night, Wade hammered the first new beam into place. Nora held the lantern again, and this time, she didn't tremble. You don't shoot first. But now, they knew sometimes, surviving means being the second shot they never expected. The man in the gray suit stepped off the train, like he owned the dirt it stopped on, polished boots, clean collar, no dust, no smile. He stood out in Amarillo like a wolf at a church picnic, too sharp to blend, too calm to question. He carried no luggage, just a thin briefcase and a silver-tipped cane, which he didn't need to walk. Folks stopped to watch as he made his way down Main Street, eyes slipping off him like oil on glass. Nora saw him from the porch of the general store, one hand resting on a bag of flour, the other frozen mid-air. She watched the way he walked. Deliberate, smooth. Like someone who didn't believe in being chased. Behind her, Calvin muttered, "That's a man with signatures in his pocket and nothing good to say." Nora didn't disagree. The man stopped in front of the sheriff's office. He didn't knock, just walked in. Wade was hammering frame boards when Nora arrived, dust rising in the heat, shirt soaked through at the collar. She jumped down from the wagon and handed him a canteen. "We've got a visitor," she said. Wade drank deep, then wiped his mouth. "Railway. Hire." He raised a brow. "Federal hire." He didn't ask what that meant. He just wiped his hands and followed. Inside the sheriff's office, the man in gray had already taken the only chair. Sheriff Dobbins stood behind his desk, arms crossed, face pale under his mustache. The stranger looked up when Wade and Nora walked in. "You're Mr. Callahan," he said. Not a question. Wade nodded. The man smiled slightly. "I've read your claim. And a thorough work. Misguided, but thorough. And you are?" Wade asked. He stood. "Raymond L. Coyle. Western Interest Division." Department of Infrastructure Expansion. Wade let that hang. You come all this way to tear down a house. I come to make sure progress isn't held up by sentiment. Nora stepped forward. We're not sentiment. We're legal. Coyle tilted his head, as if examining a particularly noisy bird. You're a delay. And delays are expensive. Wade crossed his arms, then buy us out. Coyle smiled again. We tried. You didn't sell? So what now? Nora asked. You threaten us in daylight instead of fire? The sheriff stiffened. Coyle didn't, Miss Hayes. He said, do you know what's coming? In 6 months that ridge will be rail line. In a year cattle runs. Postal hubs. Telegraph wire. Your town will triple in size. And your house will be in the way of all of it. It's not a house yet, Wade said. It's a promise. That's the problem. Coyle replied, promises have power. Too much and others get ideas. He picked up his briefcase, snapped it open, and laid out 3 sheets of paper. Cease order. Court summons. Notice of eminent domain. Nora felt her stomach twist. Wade didn't move. Coyle slid them forward. You can challenge. You might even win a delay. But I have 17 clerks and a stack of maps that say otherwise. He closed the briefcase, then looked directly at Nora. I'm not the villain, he said. I'm the future. And it doesn't wait. They watched him board the train 2 hours later, coat flapping in the wind, silver cane tapping the steps like punctuation. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He dropped the weight he came to deliver. Now it was theirs to carry. At dinner, Mabel was quiet until halfway through her stew when she finally said, so what's next? Wade pushed his bowl aside. Court. Fight. Buy time. And then. He looked at Nora. She answered for him. Then we decide what matters more, what we build or where we build it. Mabel leaned back. You'd move. If we have to? No. I mean you'd still build. After all this. Nora didn't hesitate. Yes. Mabel smiled, soft and tired. Then I'll start packing the china. That night, Wade sat alone at the build site. The stars were clear, too clear. That kind of stillness always came before a storm. He didn't light a fire, didn't want to be seen, but he left the lantern on inside the broken frame. Its low glow casting long shadows across the dirt, across the ashes, across the spot where they'd once stood and said, here. He didn't pray, but he did speak. To stay means war. Then he added, quieter. But to leave might mean we were never serious. I'm not the villain. I'm the future. Wade let that echo sit, then whispered to the dark. The future just picked a fight. The courtroom was hotter than it should have been, no windows open, no breeze. Just the creak of benches and the low shuffle of boots on worn pine. The judge hadn't spoken yet, and already Wade could feel sweat under his collar, trickling slow like the minutes they were losing. Nora sat beside him, straight-backed, eyes locked forward. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers clasped tight. She hadn't said a word since they walked in. Across the aisle sat Raymond L. Coyle, same gray suit, same smug calm. Beside him a government clerk, young and pale, flipping through a leather folder like he knew it better than his own name. The judge finally looked up. Case number 348. He said, voice flat, Callahan and Hayes versus the Department of Infrastructure Expansion. A pause, then, proceed. Calvin stood first, no notes, no bluster, just a plain voice and a clear file. My clients filed a legal land claim, witnessed and registered under Amarillo District jurisdiction. They broke no ordinances. No contested boundary violations. Their house was under construction before federal interest was declared. The judge nodded. Coyle rose next. His tone was polite, sterile. Your Honor, while the timeline is technically accurate, the land in question sits atop a federally valuable resource, water. The government has declared imminent need for regional development. This claim, while emotionally compelling, impedes progress and violates the Eminent Domain Expansion Act. He said it like it was scripture. The judge blinked slow, then asked, is the land essential to your operation? Coyle smiled. Absolutely. They argued for 3 hours, maps, signatures, survey records. Calvin pointed out inconsistencies in the federal timeline. Coyle presented a pre-dated approval letter no one in Amarillo had seen. When Wade objected, the clerk said only, it was filed in Washington. Which might as well have been another planet. The judge scribbled notes, asked few questions, didn't look at Wade once. By the 4th hour, Nora leaned in and whispered, "His not deciding today." Wade nodded. He'd known that since the second they saw Coyle's silver, tipped cane resting against the bench. This wasn't a trial. It was a message, and the verdict had already been written somewhere far from this room. They walked out under a sky the color of gunmetal, no rain, just pressure, the kind that made your skin itch. Calvin removed his glasses and wiped them clean, though there wasn't a smudge. "I bought you time," he said. "That's all I could do." "How much?" Wade asked. 3 weeks. Maybe 4 if the paperwork gets lost. Nora exhaled slowly. "And then they bring a crew." "They won't start with hammers," Calvin said. "They'll start with fences. And if you're still on the land, they'll have law to stand on." Wade finished. "No," Calvin corrected. "They'll have power. That's different." Back at the house, Mabel had left stew on the stove. She didn't ask how it went, didn't need to. The silence told her plenty. She handed Nora a cloth, wrapped bundle. "What's this?" Nora asked. "My grandfather's deed papers. He fought the county in 42. Built his fence right through what they called survey lines. Didn't matter. He held on until they stopped asking." Nora opened the cloth, unfolded the pages, handwritten, stubborn, legal only because he'd never let them say otherwise. "He win?" Wade asked. Mabel smiled. "No. But he never moved. Sometimes that's close enough." That night, Wade returned to the frame. It stood now with half the beams replaced, corners squared, floor laid, still fragile. But there, the wind tugged at the tarp, nailed to the far wall. Snapping it loose, he climbed up and tied it back down, then sat, right in the middle of the floor. Under stars that seemed too distant for what they were about to face, Nora joined him 10 minutes later. She brought no lantern, just her hands. She sat close, not touching, but near enough to feel her breath when she spoke. "They'll come with papers. I know. And officers. I know. And still," he turned toward her, "I'm not giving up ground to men who've never laid a single board." She looked down, then up again. "I don't need the house." He froze. "I need you. That's the thing they can't take." Wade looked away, jaw clenched. His voice came out low. "They want us scattered. Like embers. Not a fire. Then we burn together," she said, and this time she reached for his hand, held it firm. 3 days later, the first federal wagon returned, but this time no men stepped out, just a package, a wooden crate, no address, no name. Inside, a single crossbeam, burned, stamped with the government seal, and branded in red letters, "Not a fee file remvel ordr 10 device." That night, Wade nailed it to the roof of the house, high enough for the whole town to see. Then he carved his own words underneath, COMANTACI. Sometimes holding ground is the only way to prove it's yours. He didn't whisper that. He carved it, into wood, into bone, into whatever came next. The sun rose blood orange over Amarillo. It painted the half-built house in long, angry strokes. Dust floated thick in the air, the kind that clung to your throat and made words harder to speak. Nora watched it all from the porch, boots planted, rifle across her lap. Not pointed, just present. 10 days. That was the time the crate had given them. Now there were 4 left. Mabel was already in the back, boiling water and canning supplies, like it was any other Thursday. She didn't speak much since the last notice came, just moved with the focus of someone who knew silence was its own kind of preparation. Wade stepped out of the barn. Shirt stuck to his back, sawdust in his hair. He'd been reinforcing the east wall since before dawn, not because it needed it, because it was something he could control. "You eat?" Nora asked. He shook his head. "Didn't feel it." "You will. Or you'll fall." "Falling's not the part I'm worried about." She didn't smile. Didn't need to. They both knew what the next 4 days meant. By noon, news spread. The federal line had been seen just 20 miles north, caravan loaded with rails and men, no weapons. Yet, just wait, government wait. The kind that didn't need guns when it could crush you with paperwork and progress. Sheriff Dobbins came by that afternoon. He didn't step onto the land, just tipped his hat from the edge of the road. "You know what happens if they file a breach?" Wade stood beside the fence he'd finished tightening that morning. I know. Means I gotta come, Wade. With a badge. With deputies. Wade nodded. You bring 'em. Just don't bring rope. The sheriff's jaw worked, but he didn't argue. Didn't offer help either. Just rode off slow. Like he wanted to be seen trying. But not seen choosing. That night, the house wasn't quiet. It breathed, floorboards settling. Wind through unfinished windows. Lantern light casting soft, moving shadows across the bare studs. Calvin and Mabel sat at the kitchen table. There wasn't food, just maps, land deeds, old letters that maybe, somehow, proved something. Nora leaned over one, tracing a line drawn in fading ink. Here, she said, this stream cuts under both ridges. If they claim ours for water, this one's deeper. Calvin frowned. That's private ranch land, but not federal. Wade stepped closer. You think we offer a trade? No. Nora said. We offer a choice. The next morning, they rode out to Briggs' camp again. The surveyor hadn't moved. Still had the same canvas tent, same horse, same tin full of dry biscuits. He looked up as they rode in, squinting under his hat. Didn't expect you back, he said. We're not here to fight, Wade said. Briggs raised a brow. Didn't figure you for surrender either. We're offering them another path, Nora said. One they can walk without dragging this whole town through the mud. Briggs leaned back against a crate. You think the government wants an easier option, or just a faster one? Nora handed him the map. Highlighted in red was the deeper ridge stream, outside federal survey bounds. Tell them there's a cleaner route. No legal pushback, no delays. Briggs scanned it, slow. You're asking me to speak for you. No, Wade said. We're asking you to confirm what you already know. This fight isn't about need. It's about punishment. Briggs looked at them both, something flickering behind his tired eyes. Then he said, I'll make a call. They returned home under a sky full of heat, but lighter, like something had shifted, even if they didn't know what yet. Mabel met them at the gate. There's someone inside, she said. Nora felt her spine lock. Wade didn't ask. He just stepped inside, hand on his holster. But it wasn't an ambush. It was Seth, standing in the middle of the floor, hat in his hands, shirt too clean for a man who'd worked anything lately. Wade froze. Nora didn't. You lost? She asked coldly. He looked older, tired, but not soft. I heard what's coming, he said. I came to tell you something. She folded her arms. You can say it from the porch. He glanced at Wade, then back at her. There's someone helping them. Local. Wade took a step forward. Seth didn't flinch. Not this time. Nora narrowed her eyes. Why tell us? Seth hesitated, then said, because I've done wrong. But not this. And I won't watch my name tied to burning down a house built honest. He reached into his coat, pulled out a ledger, government seal on the corner. I stole it. He laid it on the table, inside lists of payments, names, dates. One name stood out, Pastor Enoch. That night, Wade and Nora sat alone under the stars. The book lay between them, unopened now. They'd read enough. How many more like him, you think? She asked. Wade shook his head. Doesn't matter. Why not? Because the difference now is we're not alone. She looked over. Even if the town stays quiet. He met her eyes. We've got truth. We've got a house that won't fall easy. And we've got each other. A pause, then he added. They can build their future. But they're gonna have to build around us. The only thing louder than fire is standing through it. And tomorrow the heat would rise. It started with silence, no birdsong, no creak of wind in the trees, just stillness. Nora woke to it. The kind of quiet that pressed against your ears, like the world was holding its breath. She sat up on the cot, heart already beating faster than it should. Wade was gone. She could feel it in the cold stretch of blanket beside her. Boots on, rifle in hand, she stepped outside. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the sky was turning that faint bruised gray, the one that comes just before a hard morning. Mabel stood near the fence line, coat thrown over her nightgown, looking north. Wade stood farther out, rifle resting against his shoulder. What is it? Nora asked. He didn't turn. Wagons. Her pulse kicked. How many? Wade shifted the rifle higher. Floor. Maybe flow. No torches. No fanfare. No sound. Just intent. Nora crossed the yard, boots crunching dry soil. Federal. Wade gave a tight nod. Coil? Didn't see. But it's them. She looked over her shoulder at the frame of the house, still standing, still unfinished, still theirs, and still in the way. By the time the wagons reached the edge of the ridge, the sun had started to rise, thin gold slicing across the field like a blade. They didn't stop at town, didn't ask permission, just rolled through Amarillo like a wind that knew its direction. People watched from porches, nobody waved, nobody warned. They'd already warned enough. The first wagon pulled up just 20 yards from the front post of Wade and Nora's land. The others fanned out behind it, a staggered line of wheels and dark uniforms. The final wagon stopped last. Raymond Coyle stepped down like he was descending from a stage, no smile this time, just calculation. He walked forward, stopping 6 feet from Wade, as if that made them equals. "You received the notice," he said. Wade didn't respond. Coyle motioned behind him. A man in uniform opened a scroll, read it out loud. Legal terms, relocation orders, terms of federal reclamation. Nora felt each word like a stone being laid in a grave. Coyle stepped forward. "You have one final opportunity to vacate voluntarily. Anything left after noon will be removed." He gestured to the other wagons, laborers, hammers, rope. They weren't bluffing. Nora stepped beside Wade. "We've filed challenge. You know that." Coyle's voice stayed even. "Challenges don't stop progress. You built your rail 3 feet off stolen lines." She snapped. "We have proof." He didn't flinch. "Proof doesn't build trains." Wade's jaw clenched. "You'll have to cross our fence to touch a board," he said. Coyle met his eyes, then turned, raised a gloved hand. Behind him, 3 men stepped forward, axes on their shoulders. Nora moved first. She walked to the center beam, the one still bearing the carved message, Quam Antake. She stood under it, hands at her sides. Wade joined her. Mabel stood just behind, and then footsteps from behind. Townfolk, 10, then 15, then more, men with tools, women with nothing but eyes full of quiet steel. Even Sheriff Dobbins. He didn't step forward, but he didn't leave either. Coyle's jaw ticked. "This is obstruction." Wade raced, not loud, just solid. "This is home." Coyle scanned the crowd. "This is trespass." "No," Nora said, voice clear. "This is witness." For the first time, Coyle faltered. He looked at the workers behind him, at the lawman waiting to act, at the people standing between him and a pile of wood. He stepped forward again, slow, looked Nora dead in the eye. "You think this ends with you?" She held his stare. "I think it starts with us now." His nostrils flared. Then he turned, walked back to the final wagon, spoke to a clerk, then climbed inside. The driver snapped the reins. The others didn't move, just waited. Coyle's wagon rolled off, a dust trail following behind it. The rest stayed, not working, not leaving, just waiting, a threat with boots. That night, the stars returned, brighter than they had any right to be. Nora and Wade sat on the new steps, freshly cut, barely nailed, but solid, behind them. The house frame stood in the dark like a promise whispered too long to forget. "He's not done," Wade said. "No." He'll come back louder. "Yes." They sat quiet, until Nora said, "But he'll come back knowing." Wade looked at her. "Knowing what?" "That we're not the kind that breaks easy." She reached down, ran her fingers along the edge of the step, then added, "Quiet. They didn't cross the line today. Next time, we make sure they can't find it." Rain came hard that night, not the soft kind that lulled crops awake. This was sheet rain, lashing, fast, pounding the frame of the house with all the fury of a sky that had seen too much waiting. Thunder cracked the sky like a warning, and wind howled through the open studs like wolves testing the edge of the camp. Wade was up before it even hit. Nora joined him on instinct, throwing on her coat over a nightdress, pulling boots on half, laced. Mabel lit the oil lamp in the kitchen, shielding it with her palm. Lightning flashed. And that's when Wade saw it, movement down by the south edge, too low to be wind, too fast to be wild. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the storm. Nora reached the door 2 seconds later, rain soaking her hair. Before she even cleared the porch, Wade was already down the slope, boots sinking in mud. Rifle aimed but not raised. She followed without words. They found it, or him, by the tree line, one of the laborers from the federal crew, hunched over something in the dirt, holding a torch that barely held flame in the wind. When the light caught his face, Wade recognized him. Mid-40s, red hair, wore gloves even when it wasn't cold. "Stop!" Wade shouted. The man bolted. Nora raised her pistol. "Don't!" Wade snapped. They gave chase, slipping through mud and brush. Thunder rolling just behind them like it was chasing too. Branches whipped past. The man stumbled once, then again. And that's when Wade tackled him from behind. The two of them hit hard, sliding down a short embankment, fists swinging. Wade caught one in the jaw, grunted, rolled. The man kicked free, tried to crawl. But Nora was already there, gun drawn, breathing heavy. "Stop moving, or I swear you won't need the rest of this storm to bury you." He froze, hands up. They dragged him back to the house and threw him into the shed, tied to the central post. Wade leaned in close, torchlight flickering between them. "What were you doing down there?" No answer. Wade grabbed the man's collar, yanked him forward. "I've got no more patience left to spend, friend." The man coughed, rainwater and blood mixed on his lip. "I was ordered to plant something." "Like what?" "Signal flag. Coordinates. So they'd know where to move fast." Nora stepped closer. "You were scouting." "For a raid." The man looked away, didn't deny it. Wade stared at him a moment longer, then turned. Outside, wind still screamed, but under it, beneath it, there was something worse, a silence waiting its turn. They didn't sleep. Not that night. They took turns watching the ridge. By morning, the crew wagons were gone, vanished before first light. But they'd left something behind. On the fence post just outside the property line, someone had nailed a single plank of dark wood. It read Ikidas Atide Duin. No seal, no name. Just letters carved rough and deep, like someone hadn't wanted to write them, but did anyway. Wade pulled the board down, handed it to Nora. Her hands were shaking. "We have a day," she said. "No," Wade answered. "We have until they think we'll break." They went into town, together, not to ask, to tell. Calvin called for a meeting in the old feed barn, where the walls still smelled like oats and gunpowder. 30 people showed, maybe more. Some stood in the back, arms crossed, waiting for someone else to speak first. Wade didn't wait. He stood up on a crate and told them flat, "They're coming tomorrow. With orders. With rope, if they have to. They won't knock. They won't care who's watching." No one moved. He kept going. "This isn't about a house anymore. It's about who gets to say what's worth keeping. Who gets to stay, who gets erased." Still silence. Then Calvin stepped forward. "I've lived here 30 years. Raised 2 boys. Buried one. I've never seen a fight picked like this that didn't come with fire after." Then he added, "But that fire won't find them sleeping. Not this time." It broke the stillness. Mabel stood. So did 2 others, then 10, then all of them. No cheers, just nods, quiet resolve. One old man in the back said, "Then we best sharpen our shovels and brace the doors." That night, Wade and Nora walked the perimeter one last time, lantern in hand, boots sinking into soaked earth. "This isn't going to be clean," Nora said. "No. They might shoot. They might. Are you ready to do the same?" He stopped walking, turned toward her. "I'm ready to be last." She didn't ask what that meant, because she already knew. She reached into her coat, pulled something out. It was the first nail they'd ever driven together, bent from that storm weeks ago. Still dark with ash, she placed it into his hand. He held it like it weighed more than lead. Then she whispered, "Let this be the last thing they ever try to bury here." They walked on. It began before the light, just after the crickets stopped, but before the birds began, when the sky was pale and unsure, and the wind had the feel of something holding back. Wade stood at the edge of the porch, rifle in hand. He hadn't slept. Nora was beside him, coat buttoned high, boots laced tight. Mabel was inside, setting coffee to boil even though no one could eat. She wasn't expecting breakfast. She just didn't want the silence. Across the field, down the ridge, the road was empty. But not for long. By 6, dust appeared, low at first, then thicker. Then came the wagons, for this time, same as before, but lined tighter, purposeful. Meant to carry more than laborers. 2 men rode ahead, black coats, badges behind them, 3 others, eyes shaded, guns visible. And finally, Raymond Coyle, gray suit, immaculate, hat pulled low. He stepped down without a word. The officers followed. They approached the property line, but didn't cross. Wade and Nora waited, still, calm. When Coyle stopped, he looked not at the house, but at the people behind it. There were nearly 40 now, lined along the frame, silent as stone, men and women, a few children, tools in hand, no one armed, but none of them moved. Coyle took off his hat, not out of respect, out of calculation. "This is your final warning," he said, voice carrying on the wind. "You've been given notice. You've ignored the law." No one answered. Coyle waited, then nodded. The officers moved first, slow, measured, boots toward the fence. When the first one reached for the latch, Wade stepped off the porch, not fast, just firm. He placed one hand on the post, no farther. The man hesitated. Coyle called out, "You going to shoot an officer of the federal government?" "No," Wade said, "but I'll stand between you and this house until there's nothing left of me." Coyle walked forward then, slowly, close enough to look Wade in the eye. This land was bought by men who saw a future. You're standing in the way of that. Wade didn't blink. "Maybe that's because your future doesn't fit everyone." Coyle smiled, thin and joyless. "History won't remember you." Wade shrugged. "I'm not building for history. I'm building for her." He glanced at Nora. She hadn't flinched. Coyle looked to the crowd, then to the house. Unfinished, stubborn, still standing. He turned back to the officers. "Clear it." One of them stepped forward, but stopped short. The others shifted, unsure. That's when a sound broke the stillness, a creak of a wagon, from behind the line. A new figure arrived, on horseback, hat tilted back, coat heavy with road dust. It was Briggs the surveyor. He dismounted, walked past the townsfolk, and straight up to Coyle. He held out a folded paper. "I suggest you read this before you tear down something you can't rebuild." Coyle took it, unfolded, scanned, and for the first time, his expression changed just a flicker. "But enough," Briggs said. "Alternate survey approved. Higher ridge, no obstruction. No delays, faster delay track, lower elevation, less runoff risk." He paused. "Your route has changed." Coyle didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. Briggs added, "You forced this, and you're wasting $3 million in federal funds. Not to mention you'll have 40 witnesses willing to testify you escalated when another path was offered." Silence. Then the officers turned one by one and stepped back. Wade didn't relax, not yet, but Nora lowered her hand from her coat. Coyle looked up at Wade, voice quiet. "This isn't over." Wade's voice came low and clear. "It is here." Coyle crumpled the paper once in his hand, then dropped it and walked away. No words, no goodbye. He climbed into the final wagon and rode off into dust. The sun rose clean and gold. People didn't cheer, but they exhaled. One by one, they turned back toward town, toward farms, toward work waiting. But not before they each placed a hand on the post by the porch. Just once. As if saying, "We saw it, we were here." Briggs stayed long enough to shake Wade's hand. Then Nora's. Then he left too. And it was just the three of them again. Mabel brought out coffee. No one said much, but the smell was stronger than fear now. They finished the house in silence over the next 2 weeks. No ceremony, no crowds, just boards placed one by one, windows fitted, roof sealed, floor swept. When they hung the door, Nora ran her hand along the edge, then stepped outside, looked back at what they'd made. It wasn't grand, wasn't finished in polish or perfect paint, but it stood, and more than that. It belonged. Wade came to her side, arms crossed, dirt still on his shirt. She asked, "What'll we do now?" He looked out at the field. "At the land they hadn't given up. Same thing we planned," he said, jest with roots deeper than before. She smiled, then reached into her pocket, pulled out the bent nail, the one they'd saved. She held it out. "I think it should stay here. Somewhere in the walls." He took it, turned it in his hand, then nodded. They walked inside together, and behind them, the door closed with a sound like a chapter ending. Not in silence, but in strength. Some things are worth holding, not because they're big, not because they're easy to defend, but because they're the place you finally stop running and build.